In the village of Hollowbrook, every house kept a lantern, no larger than a robin's egg. They hung from iron hooks beside each front door, quiet and dark through the daylight hours. Only when the last light of evening slipped behind the hills did they begin to glow softly, steadily, like a memory trying to stay warm. The villagers called them the Lanterns of the Lost. No one quite remembered who had first hung them there or why they only woke at midnight. Some said they held the dreams people had forgotten by morning. Others said they were simply old and tired, and the darkness gave them strength to shine. Either way, the lanterns had been part of Hollowbrook for as long as anyone could recall, and no one questioned them anymore. Except perhaps for Elara. Elara was 12, though she carried herself like someone much older. She had quiet eyes the color of river stones and a habit of walking the village paths long after most children were tucked beneath quilts. Her mother said she had been born listening to things no one else could hear: the creak of old floorboards, the sigh of wind through chimneys, the distant hush of the forest at the edge of town. Elara never argued. She simply smiled and kept listening. On this particular night, the air was cool and smelled of damp leaves and chimney smoke. A thin mist drifted between the cottages, softening the edges of everything. Elara pulled her shawl tighter and stepped outside just as the church bell tolled the first stroke of midnight. One by one, the lanterns woke. They did not flare brightly. They breathed to life, gentle golden pulses that painted the cobblestones in slow, sleepy light. Elara walked past them slowly, the way one walks past sleeping animals, not wanting to disturb their rest. Most lanterns glowed steadily, their light calm and even. A few flickered once or twice, as if sighing in their sleep. But when she reached the far end of Willow Lane, where the last cottage stood half hidden by an old yew tree, she stopped. The lantern there was different. It did not glow steadily. It pulsed once, twice, 3 times, like a heartbeat that had forgotten its rhythm. The light inside was not the warm gold of the others. It was paler, almost silver, and it seemed to stretch and shrink as though something inside were trying to form words. Elara took one careful step closer. The lantern swayed on its hook, even though there was no wind. She tilted her head. For a moment, she thought she heard nothing at all. Then, very softly, so softly she might have imagined it, the lantern whispered, "The river that flowed upward." Elara's breath caught. The words were faint, like someone speaking from the bottom of a deep well. They hung in the air for a heartbeat, then dissolved into silence. She waited. The lantern pulsed again. "Where the stars learned to swim." Another pause. Longer this time. Elara moved closer until she stood directly beneath the hook. The silver light touched her face like cool water. She could feel the warmth of the other lanterns behind her. But this one felt different, alive, in a way that made her chest feel tight and strangely peaceful at the same time. She whispered back, barely louder than the mist, "Who are you talking to?" The lantern did not answer at first. Then, very slowly, the light inside it shifted. For the briefest moment, Elara thought she saw a shape forming inside the glass. A small boat, or perhaps a pair of hands, cupping something precious. The image melted away before she could be sure. The whisper came again, softer still. The girl who listened too long. Elara felt a shiver, but not from cold. It was the shiver of recognition, the way you feel when a half-remembered song begins to play. She sat down on the low stone wall beneath the lantern, wrapping her shawl around her knees. The mist curled around her ankles like a friendly cat. Above her, the lantern continued its slow, uneven pulse. Another fragment drifted out, so quiet she almost missed it. And the door that only opens when you stop looking for it. Elara closed her eyes. The word settled somewhere behind her ribs, warm and heavy. She did not try to understand them, not yet. She simply let them rest there, like seeds dropped into dark soil. The other lanterns along Willow Lane continued their steady glow, but the strange one above her kept whispering, each new fragment arriving like a gentle wave against the shore of her mind. The clock that counted backward. The tree that sang in reverse. The boat made of moonlight. Elara's breathing slowed to match the lantern's pulse. The mist grew thicker, wrapping the lane in a soft gray blanket. Somewhere far off, an owl called once and fell silent. The village slept on, unaware that one of its lanterns had begun telling stories again. She did not know how long she sat there. Time felt different beneath that flickering light. Minutes stretched like taffy. Her thoughts grew slow and round like river stones, polished by years of gentle current. The last whisper she heard, before her eyelids grew too heavy, was the softest of all. "This story belongs to you." Elara smiled without opening her eyes. The words wrapped around her like the shawl, warm and safe. She let her head rest against the cool stone wall. The lantern's silver light painted soft patterns across her closed eyelids, shifting constellations, half-formed boats, rivers that flowed the wrong way. Somewhere in the distance, the church bell began to toll the hour again, but the sound reached her as if from underwater, muffled, distant, unimportant. The lantern above her continued its quiet pulse. And Elara, for the first time in many nights, felt the edges of the waking world begin to blur. She did not fight it. She simply listened. And as the mist wrapped her more tightly, and the silver light grew softer still, the lantern whispered one final fragment, so faint it might have been only the wind through the yew tree. Chapter 1 has only just begun. Elara woke to sunlight slanting across her quilt in thin golden ribbons. For a moment, she lay very still, listening to the ordinary sounds of morning. The kettle beginning to sing in the kitchen, the distant clop of the baker's cart on the cobblestones, the soft rustle of her mother folding laundry downstairs. Everything was exactly as it should be. And yet, something inside her chest felt different. She lifted her hand and turned it slowly in the light. There, just beneath the skin of her palm was the faintest silver shimmer, like a drop of moonlight that had decided to stay. It did not glow. It simply rested there, quiet and cool, as if it had always belonged. When she closed her fingers, the shimmer disappeared. When she opened them again, it returned. Elara smiled the small, secret smile she kept only for herself. She dressed slowly, brushing her dark hair with long, thoughtful strokes. At breakfast, her mother asked if she had slept well. Elara nodded and said the words that were expected. Yes, thank you. But her mind was already drifting back to Willow Lane, to the yew tree, to the lantern that had spoken in pieces. All through the day, the fragments followed her. While she helped sweep the front step, she heard again the soft whisper of the river that flowed upward. While she shelled peas for supper, the clock that counted backward ticked quietly behind her thoughts. When she walked to the well for water, she caught herself listening for the tree that sang in reverse. The words did not frighten her. They settled inside her like warm stones, heavy and comforting. By late afternoon, the silver shimmer on her palm had grown slightly brighter. Not enough for anyone else to notice, only enough for Elara to feel its gentle pulse whenever she pressed her hand to her heart. As the sun began to sink and the hills turned the color of old honey, Elara's feet carried her, quite naturally, back to Willow Lane. The last cottage looked exactly as it had the night before. Quiet, a little lonely, half hidden by the dark yew. Its lantern hung motionless on the iron hook. In the daylight, it appeared ordinary, a simple sphere of clouded glass, no different from any of the others. Yet, when Elara stood beneath it, she felt the same soft pull she had felt at midnight, as if the lantern were breathing in time with her own lungs. She waited. The sun slipped lower. Shadows lengthened. One by one, the other lanterns along the lane began their evening glow. Steady, golden, untroubled. But the lantern above Elara remained dark. She did not mind. She sat on the low stone wall again, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, and simply listened to the village settling into night. Somewhere, a door closed. Somewhere, a dog barked once and fell silent. The air grew cool and smelled of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Then, without warning, the lantern flickered. A single silver pulse, no brighter than a firefly. Then another, and another. Elara leaned forward. The light inside the glass began to move, not randomly, but in slow, deliberate patterns, as though it were painting pictures only she could see. She watched, hardly breathing, as the fragments returned, one by one, drifting out like smoke from a dying fire. The girl who listened too long. The words wrapped around her like the mist had the night before. This time, they felt warmer, more personal. She carried the river in her pocket. Elara's fingers brushed the place where the silver shimmer lived beneath her skin. She could almost feel cool water flowing there, upward, just as the lantern had said, until the door found her. A new fragment, clearer than the others. Elara closed her eyes and let it settle. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw, very briefly, a plain wooden door standing in a hallway of soft gray light. It had no handle, only a small silver keyhole shaped like a crescent moon. The lantern pulsed again, and the boat waited. Elara opened her eyes. The image of the door faded, but the feeling remained. A quiet certainty that somewhere, in some place she had not yet visited, a small boat made of moonlight was rocking gently, waiting for her to step aboard. She stayed beneath the lantern until the church bell tolled midnight. The other lanterns glowed steadily, but this one, the one that had chosen her, continued its uneven, whispering rhythm. Each new fragment arrived slower than the last, as though the lantern itself were growing tired, or perhaps simply careful not to give too much away at once. The stars learned to swim because she asked them to. The clock counted backward so she could have one more hour. The tree sang in reverse so the night would never end. Elara felt her eyelids growing heavy again. The stone wall beneath her felt softer than any pillow. The mist returned, curling around her ankles, her wrists, her thoughts. She did not fight it. She let the fragments drift through her mind like leaves on a slow river. The final whisper of the night was the gentlest yet. You are almost ready to remember. Ilara's head nodded forward. The silver shimmer on her palm brightened for a single heartbeat, then softened again. She did not see it. She was already slipping into the soft gray space between waking and sleeping, where rivers could flow upward and clocks could count backward without anyone minding. Above her, the lantern continued its slow pulse. And in the quiet lane, while the rest of Hollowbrook dreamed ordinary dreams, Elara dreamed in fragments, beautiful, broken pieces of a story that felt both brand new and older than the hills themselves. She did not wake when the mist finally wrapped her completely. She simply floated, and the lantern kept watch. When Elara opened her eyes the next morning, the first thing she saw was the silver shimmer on her palm. It was brighter now, brighter than yesterday, though still faint enough that only she could see it. It pulsed once, softly, in time with her heartbeat, then settled into a quiet glow that felt like a secret shared between old friends. She pressed her hand to her chest and whispered the words the lantern had given her. The girl who listened too long. The shimmer warmed against her skin. All through breakfast and chores, the fragments stayed with her, but they no longer felt scattered. They were beginning to braid themselves together, like threads finding their way into a single gentle tapestry. While she fed the chickens, she heard the river that flowed upward. While she dusted the windowsills, she heard the tree that sang in reverse. And when she walked past the old well, she caught herself humming a tune that sounded suspiciously like a clock counting backward. Her mother noticed her distraction and smiled. "You have that faraway look again, little moon." Elara only nodded. She did not tell her mother about the lantern or the shimmer or the door with the crescent moon keyhole. Some stories, she was learning, were meant to be carried quietly until they were ready to be spoken aloud. By afternoon, the sky had turned the soft gray of old linen. A light rain began to fall, not enough to drive people indoors, just enough to make the cobblestones shine and the air smell of wet earth and fallen leaves. Elara slipped away from the cottage with a small woven basket, telling her mother she was gathering herbs from the edge of the forest. She did not go to the forest. She went to Willow Lane. The last cottage looked even lonelier in the rain. Its windows were dark. The yew tree dripped slow, steady drops onto the stone wall where Elara had sat the night before. The lantern hung motionless on its hook, ordinary glass once more. Elara stood beneath it and waited. The rain whispered against the leaves. The village bells rang the hour in the distance. Time passed in that slow, dreamy way it sometimes does, when you are listening for something that has not yet decided to speak. Then the lantern flickered. Not once, not twice. 3 times. Long, slow pulses that painted the wet cobblestones in silver light. The glass sphere began to glow from within, brighter than it had the night before. Inside the light, shapes moved again, gentle, half-formed pictures that Elara could almost name. She reached up without thinking and let her fingers brush the warm glass. The lantern did not pull away. Instead, the light inside it steadied, and the whispers came clearer than ever before. The river flowed upward because you asked it to carry your wishes to the stars. Elara closed her eyes. In the darkness, she saw herself, not the 12-year-old girl standing in the rain, but another version of herself, younger, standing on the bank of a river that ran the wrong way. She was dropping small silver pebbles into the water. Each pebble turned into a tiny boat and sailed upward into the sky. The stars learned to swim because you showed them how to float on dreams. The vision shifted. Now she was standing in a meadow of glowing grass, reaching up to touch the stars that had come down to play. They swirled around her fingers like fireflies made of light. The clock counted backward, so you could have one more night to listen. Elara felt her breath catch. The clock tower in the village square appeared in her mind, its hands moving the wrong direction, while she sat beneath it, listening to stories that had not yet been told. The tree sang in reverse, so the night would stretch long enough for you to remember. The yew tree above her seemed to lean closer. Its branches made a soft, singing sound that ran backward through the raindrops. Then came the longest whisper, yet almost a full sentence, spoken with the patience of someone who had been waiting a very long time. And the door with the crescent keyhole will open when you stop searching for the key, because you have carried it in your hand all along. Elara opened her eyes. The silver shimmer on her palm flared brightly for a single heartbeat. In that flash, she saw it clearly. Not just a glow, but a tiny crescent moon shape, no bigger than a teardrop, etched into her skin like a birthmark she had never noticed before. The key. It had been there the whole time. She pressed her palm flat against the warm glass of the lantern. The light inside pulsed once, twice, in perfect time with the shimmer. For a moment, Elara felt as though she were standing on both sides of the glass at once, inside the lantern and outside it, in this world and in the world the whispers came from. The rain fell softer now. The village grew quieter. The other lanterns along Willow Lane glowed their steady golden light. But this one, the one that had chosen her, burned silver and steady, no longer flickering, no longer uncertain. Elara did not move. She simply stood, hand pressed to the glass, letting the final fragments of the night settle inside her like warm stones dropped into a quiet pond. You are almost ready. The boat is waiting. The door is already open. Her eyelids grew heavy. The rain on her shawl felt like the gentlest of lullabies. The stone wall beneath her seemed to soften, as though it had been waiting all these years to become a pillow. She slid down until she was sitting once more, back against the wall, legs drawn up, chin resting on her knees. The lantern above her continued its slow, steady pulse. And Elara, for the third night in a row, let herself drift. This time the fragments did not come as separate whispers. They wove together into something larger, a soft, silver river of story that carried her gently away from the rainy lane, away from the yew tree, away from the ordinary world that was beginning to feel more and more like a dream. She floated, and somewhere, in the gray light between waking and sleeping, she heard the soft creak of a wooden door opening on its own.